Hey everyone, and welcome to the Courage Conversation Show. I'm your host, Ashley Easter, and I am so excited for this episode tonight because I am bringing on my husband, Will Easter, onto the show. Woo! I'm going to tell you a little bit about him in just a second, but before I do, I just want to say to all the survivors who are affected by the Bill Cosby release from prison, our hearts really go out to you, both the victims who were directly impacted by him, and then all survivors who have to live with their abuser on the loose on a daily basis. This is not okay. I really think this is a miscarriage of justice, and it would be remiss for me to not mention this at the beginning of this episode because it really is impacting a lot of survivors. If you're in a situation where you need help and support, you can go to courage365.org and click on our Need Help tab, where we have a variety of hotlines that you can reach out to, as well as different helpful resources. And feel free to share your thoughts and feelings inside the Courage 365 Facebook group, where we have a great supportive community there. Now, back to the interview with Will. So, we are married. That is the first part of his bio that I'd like to share. I usually read somebody's bio, but I figured I would do this a little bit more off the cuff. So, Will has been working with Courage 365 since before it was Courage 365, since before it was the Courage Conference, all the way back to when we were just dreaming this up in our little apartment in Virginia. So while you see me as the face of this organization, Will has been there every step of the way, and he's been an integral part in Courage 365, the Courage Conference, and really it would not be possible if he was not on the team and supporting this venture, this work together. And again, you see me as the face a lot of times, but he is just an integral part of all of this. He's also the president on our board for our nonprofit, Courage 365. And aside from that, he also has a day job. So he has all this work that he's doing, plus being married to me. But he's also a real estate broker in the Winston-Salem area. And so if you need any homes sold, check him out. I'm just going to get a plug because it does help us financially. And in addition to that, he has a very big philanthropist's heart where he loves to give to other people. He loves to help support survivors and other people who are in needs in monetary ways. And so he's just had a beautiful ministry of that for so many years. And that's what really attracted me to him in the beginning, was not only he's attractive, but also that he has this huge heart where he just takes care of so many people and has so much compassion. And that gets me into what our conversation is going to be about today. We have been married for almost 7 years now, like 6.5.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And he lives with a survivor, me. And I've experienced multiple forms of abuse. And I talk about that story on a regular basis. But we wanted in this show to be able to feature what it is like for a spouse living with their spouse who's experienced abuse. Because let me tell you, not all of my days are easy. And since we're living together, that means not all of his days are easy. And it is possible to have a beautiful relationship, even if one person or both people are survivors. But we really wanted to focus on kind of his story along this journey. So, Will, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Before we kind of get into all that, maybe we can share a little bit about our story and how we met, because I feel like some people know the story, but not everybody does. But it's worth telling, just so you can get to know us and our personality and relationship a little bit. So, do you want to start us out?
Honestly, I like when you started out. And
Okay.
Then I can fill in the holes.
All right, that sounds good. That's why I'm the face of the organization. I love to talk.
Yes, and I don't.
It's a treat having him on. So like I have told you all before, I grew up in a very cult-like environment, very, very strict, rigid rules. I had been in courtship before, where it was very parent guided. There was a lot of strict rules, no hugging, no kissing, no holding hands until certain points. And I even had a whole checklist of what we could do at different stages in a courtship, all that kind of stuff. And when I started realizing like this cult thing was not for me, I started dating, like real people dating, getting out in the world, trying to meet people. And I'm telling you, pickings were slim. Um, and there was a lot of, funny kind of stories that I have about my dating experience, but I really wanted to find a man who was going to treat me as an equal human, because that was important to me coming from a patriarchal background, somebody that I would be madly in love with, and someone who would understand about some of the abuse that I'd experienced, or at least be very sensitive to it. So I had a friend, and her mom, she tried to set me up on a blind date. She contacted me one morning, really early in the morning, probably around like 7 o'clock. And I know for some people that's not early, but her daughter got up much later in the afternoon. So when I got like a call and text from her to call her that early, I was like, oh my gosh, something happened to my friend. She would never contact me this early in the morning. And so I talked to her, and she's like, I met this, really amazing guy. He's super handsome. And, I think you all would be a good fit. Do you want to go out with him? And then she showed me a picture of him, and I was like, yes, I would be interested. And so she set up a date for that night for us to come to her house and meet. And you want to pick up the story from there?
Yeah, and so so it really was interesting just how it all came about, because under a normal day, this wouldn't have actually happened, because at this period of time, I was actually, well, first off, let me even take a step back. Well, actually, I want to go into this, and then I'll come back to what I was getting ready to say. So, normally at this point in time in my life, I was getting up. I was at the gym at 5:30. I was doing CrossFit in the mornings. And this particular day, I forgot my breakfast, which was like unusual for me, because I always brought my breakfast and finished with CrossFit. I'd go to the office, eat my breakfast, then start the day from there. And so this particular day, I just forgot my breakfast for some untold reason. And so anyway, I'm leaving CrossFit, heading to the office, and I was like, I'm going to go to my favorite coffee shop, which I went often, maybe not every morning, but I went often. I'm just going to go pop in there, grab a little something to eat, and then head to the office. And I was like, no, I'm just going to head on to the office. So I keep on going. I need to go to that coffee shop. And I was like, no, I'm just going to head on to the office. I'll eat later. And then by this time, I've already passed the coffee shop, and I'm a little far. And I was like, what, hey, I've just got to get something to eat. So I turned the car around, went back to the coffee shop, and then when I walked in, I met up with my mutual friend of Ashley and mine, and she had about 2 seconds of small talk, and she said, "Are you dating anybody?" And she had asked me that a couple times before, but I had already been dating someone, and this is what I was getting ready to say a little while ago. I'd actually been dating someone for probably, I don't know, almost a year actually at this point in time, but I just had broken up with her the preceding Friday. And so this is Monday. So 3 days beforehand, I just had broken up with this girl, and she was great, but it just wasn't working out. So anyway, the moment was just right. I had just broken up with her, so I was officially single. Somehow I'd forgotten my breakfast, and so I just showed up here in this one moment where I was eventually introduced to Ashley. And so, yeah, our mutual friend, again, this is like 7 o'clock in the morning, and she had set us up for a date, with her and her family that night. And so it was all just real quick, and yeah, I just was not expecting it at all.
Yeah, no, it was surprising to me, and that it happened that night. We went and we had brownies and coffee at, our mutual friend's house, saw their kids and all that stuff. And then it was kind of funny. We went outside so I could go home, and Will was going to walk me to the car. And he was like, "Can I give you a hug?" And I tried to play it off like it was no big deal. Like, I just hug guys all the time. But, coming from this cult-like environment where you weren't supposed to hug or kiss or touch or even hold hands, all that kind of stuff until certain points, I was like freaking out. And then, but it was nice that he asked. And I said, "Yeah, you can give me a hug." And I was just like, oh, I'm cool with this. I'm cool with this. So he gave me a hug. And then he said, would you want to go out on another date? And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. That sounds good. Just trying to play it cool when I was inside, like,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I mean, and like he really did play it cool because I really didn't know that any of this was a big thing because, I mean, I just hate to say it, like I've been on a whole lot of dates in my life, and so, I've always asked about, giving someone a hug. That's just kind of the thing I do.
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of learned that or was taught that, early on to, especially if you're ever going to be in someone's space, just, ask permission to be there.
Right. Yeah. He actually taught me really what consent meant. Through that and through our other, growing of our physical relationship, I'd never really been in a spot where it was, consensual on the part where I could freely say no and have that respected, or I could say yes and also have that respected. So that was kind of a pivotal moment.
Yeah, and so there's just a lot of things, especially on that first date. Like I had no idea what I was getting into.
Because it's not really a first date thing to be like, yeah, I'm from a cult. That was actually a second date thing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and of course on the second date you told me that you were carrying a knife too, so I had to be careful, keep me on my toes.
I had some bad relationships, so I was like,
absolutely.
If he's not afraid of my knife.
So,
but that was a great date. We found that we actually separately had gone to the same beaches growing up, and it was kind of an isolated beach, not one that was very popular, particularly when we were growing up.
And growing up literally states away,
mm-hmm.
and happened to vacation at the same basically the same location, what ended up being only 5 doors down from one another and using the same beach access.
Yes.
So it's just crazy, like, hundreds of miles away, of course didn't know each other,
mm-hmm.
and then just happened to vacation again, the same city, houses 5 doors down from one
yes.
another, and then share the same beach access. So that was kind of crazy.
Yeah, there were a lot of signs and like intuitive pieces that came up. I mean, even him, you going back for the breakfast,
mm-hmm.
That I think that was your intuition kicking in. And anyway, so that's kind of another thing. But really, truly, like on our first real date, after the meeting, I did start to mention to him that I'd experienced some forms of abuse. And while I didn't say everything, I was pretty honest about that. And I wondered what his reaction would be. And thankfully, your reaction was really kind and understanding, and you didn't probe for, information that I didn't want to give, but you were very kind, and that really stood out to me from the beginning, that you weren't scared away by it, and also that, you didn't try to just, it wasn't like a tabloid story where you're trying to get all the juicy details.
And I think, part of that was just, again, like this wasn't, my first date.
Mm-hmm.
And I, I mean, I'm 14 years older than she is. And so I've just had more opportunity to date a lot more people, and mm-hmm. I have. And so I've heard a lot of stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known a lot of the experiences that a lot of people have had, and unfortunately,
mm-hmm.
but I've known a lot of stories. And so, maybe that, I don't know, just allowed me to be a bit more empathetic, and just, I don't know, just more caring and listening,
mm-hmm.
not really, talking and interjecting, but just, letting you share whatever you feel comfortable in sharing, mm-hmm. and just kind of going from there. And again, this is, first, second date type stuff. Mm-hmm. So, I'm trying to, get to know her as much as I can as a person, today. But yeah, I mean, there are moments in life that clearly will stick with you for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of your story. And so, I don't know, we just were sort of tiptoeing in those waters at the very beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And he wasn't afraid of the knife. He took me out for chocolate after dinner. So, it was good. I was like, but yeah, so we actually knew pretty quickly that we were supposed to get married, that we were right for each other, that's our soulmate. I think I knew about 2 weeks in, and you knew like...
I mean, really, probably our first official date, I was like, I'm going to marry this girl. And that's crazy because, again, I've been out on a lot of dates and that sort of thing, and just never it was just different. And I really can't even PowerPoint that for you. It just was different. And I pretty much knew, really that first official date that I'm probably going to marry this girl.
He didn't tell me that though, because that would have
Didn't
been
tell
a
her that.
little
That's
scary.
right.
But about 2 weeks in, I knew that too. We dated for 4 months, then we were engaged for 4 months, and that really was like a rescue for me because I was ideologically changing about the things that had been in my background in the cult like environment. But getting married really was my ticket out of there. And we married for love. I totally married you for love. You know that. But also, it was an escape. And, I remember kind of having a sigh of relief when we got into our getaway car, rightly named, when you're leaving. And also, like, a huge, at our wedding ceremony. But also a huge relief when we finally got onto our honeymoon. We took a cruise, and just being like in the ocean where nobody could contact us. We didn't have our cell phones, and just feeling safe for the first time and feeling safe with both. Um, and I think the next question I really want to kind of ask you about is, I talked to you about some of the abuse that I'd experienced ahead of time, but I was really still in the beginning stages of processing and coming to grips with what had happened to me. And, there were just a lot of things that it wasn't that I forgot them, it was just I was trying to get out of a cult, and that was what I was focused on. And so there was a flood of other things that once I was finally in this safe relationship and we were married, that more of my background came up, particularly because I was having this contrast between a healthy, safe, consensual relationship where I felt respected, but then, you know, while that's happening, it's also kind of triggering me a little bit because I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I deserved to have a voice like this. And so, pretty early on, once we got married, like a lot more of the abuse I was able to feel comfortable sharing. And I guess I'm just wondering, how did you feel? Because I don't think either of us were expecting the amount of trauma that I had when that kind of became visible.
Yeah. I mean, it is really interesting, and it's hard to communicate all that could literally be communicated. I mean, it's just such a big thing and a big topic. But um, you know, I guess the way that I felt was like, I mean, I knew that I too married, this woman, for love. And so, like, that was a sure thing, in my mind. And so, when I knew that she was experiencing, these, thoughts and feelings and emotions and just this trauma, like, it just, I guess, just over time, it just became, more and more. Um, I don't know. It just Things just became more apparent, and so I don't know. Back to the original question of how I felt. I mean, I guess I just felt compassion, for my wife, and that this was something that she was having to navigate. And I think largely, up until this point, she had navigated it pretty much by herself. She had not been in any type of a safe place, a safe environment to where, she could talk. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, and I hope I'm not stepping into some other questions that are going to be coming, but I think something that was just interesting and that allowed this to work was, I mean, number one, she did a lot of work. And so let's just, that
Yeah.
needs to be kind of front and center. She was willing to speak openly and to share very openly, again, the thoughts, her feelings, things that I was doing that was triggering her. Um, and again, all this is just totally unbeknownst to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was open and honest with me and allowed me space to be open and honest with her. But in doing that, I was holding space for her to be open and honest with me.
Mm-hmm.
And you just see how it just kind of
Yeah.
goes in a circle. And so I think that's really, kind of the secret to kind of navigating situations like this is, like, if you only have one willing party,
Right.
like, it's just going to be so much tougher.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say it's going to be impossible, but man, it's going to be a whole lot more challenging than if you do have kind of two individuals who are, wanting and willing. Number one, who are committed to one another, see the value in open communication, and are willing to navigate with one another. And as each person grows individually and as we grow collectively, being okay with that. Because the girl I married and who actually is today unrecognizable.
Not the same.
But in all the best ways. In all the best ways. And so if I hadn't have grown alongside of her, then I would still be the man that I was when we met. And that wouldn't be a proper, fit or mate for her today. And so we just happened to be at the beginning of this. Really, it's been a beautiful journey. It's been a hard journey, but it's been a beautiful journey. That we've both been on, and we've grown in just ways that are just, it just can't be communicated. I mean, just in every aspect of every way. We just have grown, and it's been great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing that up. That was kind of my next question I wanted you to talk about, and you did there, is, about the role of communication, because like you said, you have to have two willing people that are willing to communicate. If I decided that I wasn't going to talk about the abuse I'd experienced and let him in and know that, hey, I'm having a trigger right now. I know that you didn't intend for this to be triggering to me, but this is triggering to me, and that's why I'm reacting this way. It's not you, it's this trauma. If I hadn't been able to communicate that and, go to therapy, do the work to be able to have words to communicate it, and if I just kind of blew up or, acted, distant or, whatever, I think it would have been a lot more challenging.
Totally.
So I think that is really important, that no matter how hard it is, if you're with a person that is safe, and I would say if you're not with a person that's safe, that's a problem. You need to think about that and address that separately. But if you're with a person that's safe and will prove that to me, very, very early on in our marriage, that he would go to bat for me, he would go to war for me, with my family even. And we built this trust very quickly, and so I was able to communicate what I was going through. And then just the way you responded was, you didn't take things personally, and I tried to depersonalize if I was having a PTSD reaction after it. So, if you said or did something, instead of me immediately going to the thought of like, he's trying to hurt me, I had to work through my mind, through therapy, through all things, like, he's actually not trying to hurt me, and maybe the thing he's doing or said doesn't, is triggering me because of things I've had in the past. Like, he's not actually hurting me by, saying a certain word or phrase that, in a different context means something else, but being able to say, hey, that triggered me. That's why I need to go spend a little time alone, because it's not about you. It's about a trauma. And almost bringing, like, it almost felt like we had like a third person in our marriage, which is the trauma. And it was like, when we kept pointing the blame at the trauma instead of each other, that's when it started, that's how it worked.
Yeah.
I would say that.
Yeah. And I think, in addressing the trauma or a disagreement, or, whenever we didn't see eye to eye on something, one of the things, and I don't even know if we actually sat down and made an official rule, or if we just sort of eased into it and then later kind of named it.
Right.
But, one of the things that we have been very intentional about is, if there is something that we don't see eye to eye on, and so we're discussing it. And I would say that probably pretty much everybody, when you're in some type of a discussion and you feel things just sort of start to get heated, you sort of know what that moment is, but I would say that everybody knows that there's a point when just something just happens, and you know that you're getting ready to cross a line, say something that you don't really mean, um, feel the need to win more than listen to and respect the other person. Like there's just this moment that exists, and so we've actually been very intentional about paying attention to that moment, because I can promise you, in dealing with a lot of trauma that Ashley's experienced, and I don't know, truth be told, like that's probably the majority of trauma in our relationship has
Right.
been, trauma that
You had a
Ashley has
pretty
brought.
chill childhood,
It wasn't
which
so
is
bad.
nice.
Yeah, it wasn't so bad. But I mean, I can honestly say that, we've never had an argument. We have never raised our voices at one another. Now, I've certainly have said things that maybe, I wish I wouldn't have said it like that.
Same.
But at the same time, like even then, like I've always come back and said, I really didn't mean that, or I've just clarified, or apologized. Hey, that just wasn't appropriate. But even then, it was never, it was never an emotionally charged attack,
Right.
or a raised voice, or something to shame her, to make her feel less than.
Right.
And she's never done that to me either.
Right.
And so that's really, I think, has been one of the biggest sort of keys, or contributing factors to the success of our marriage, is truly our willingness to see the other person, to truly listen to them, and just that kind of earned, trust and respect that we have just built, and it's just has just compounded over the years, and I don't know, I'd say that's just really one of the biggest things for our relationship that has proven to be successful.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with that. And so, like, for me, as a survivor, I would say any survivors who are listening, your takeaway from this is make sure you're with a safe person, number one. And then number two, do a lot of work on yourself, and then be communicative with your spouse and give them a chance to understand how you're feeling. Because there will be silly things. Like, I think it was something, I wondered if when we were if we wanted to listen to a podcast together, and Will said, well, let's wait and do it until the house is clean. And I like to listen to podcasts and stuff while I'm cleaning or something. And I was like, well, the house isn't that bad. We can do it there. And he's like, it's kind of a mess. And I was like, it's a mess? Is that my fault? I like completely had a meltdown inside. And I probably said some weird stuff to you in the moment. And then I had to realize, okay. He wasn't personally attacking me with that. He was stating his, view of the environment. And he wasn't projecting on me that because I'm a woman, I should be taking care of the house better. Like, no, he was there. He was going to clean it with me. But because of my past, I'd had this traumatic experience of like, it's always the woman's fault if the house isn't perfect and he's upset. And so, but then being able to say that, and he's like, yeah, I thought that was a little strange how you reacted, but that's helpful to know. And I was like, yeah, sorry about that. I realized that wasn't you.
And I think it's also important to know that it's not like a one and done thing. It's not that we've addressed this one item, and so we're never going to have to encounter that again. Like, that's just not reality.
Right.
It's something that happened. I became aware of it. Ashley, again, did the work, and she became aware of it. And so the next time that situation occurred, and maybe I didn't say those exact words, but the situation was the same. I had a frame of reference. I knew how to better approach the situation. So did Ashley. And so again, it's not that we addressed it one time, last week, and so then it's never going to show up again.
Right.
No, that's just not the way it happens. And honestly, even today, it's a lot less than it was, but those things still pop up, and it's just like those are just real life moments, which again over time, as you talk through things as you just navigate them together.
Mm-hmm.
Like it does get easier. Like it
Right.
certainly gets easier. I
Yeah.
would absolutely say that.
Yeah. I agree with that. I agree with that. Um, Another question I wanted to talk about because I think you did a really good job in this moment. I remember the first panic attack I had with you because I have an anxiety disorder for sure, and that pops up, and a lot of times that's how it manifests when I'm triggered. Is my anxiety, it goes up and I'm like ah, and he's like, what is going on? I'm like, oh wait, that's just my anxiety, that's
Yeah.
not you, all those kinds of things. But when I had my first full-on panic attack, gasping for breath, I remember sitting in the bed, and I was just like, I couldn't breathe. I remember you just like picked me up and just held me, and I was wondering, like, whether it's a panic attack or just general anxiety day to day, or even when I'm like in depression, if somebody else has a spouse that's going through those things, what are some things you've learned?
Well, I would say, I mean, just as far as like the panic attack, that's the first time I'd ever sort of witnessed that. And
It's not
so,
pretty.
and it's not, it's not. Um, and so, to be quite honest, like I didn't know what to do. And so it wasn't that I had thought about, okay, hey, if this happens, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. Like it just really was none of that.
Mm-hmm.
But what it was, at least as I was kind of processing it or trying to do something, was you know one, I just needed to for her to know that I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way for me to do that was to hold her, as she had said. The other thing is that there weren't any words to be
Mm-hmm.
said.
Right.
Um, there would have been no words that would have been helpful in that moment. She just needed me. She just needed to know for herself that I was there with her.
Yeah.
And so we just laid there really for the longest time. And I just,
Mm-hmm.
held her, probably rubbed her back, her arm, just tried to comfort her in those ways of just being close, being present, being
Mm-hmm.
silent, quite honestly, and just allowing her to sort of process this moment the way that she needed to. And so that was just my approach
Mm-hmm.
to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would say, other than that, just on, the more common anxiety and or moments of depression that do come and go.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not like you address it and then it disappears.
Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be nice, but it just doesn't happen that way.
Check.
um, so the way that I just really um, the way that I try to approach those things is, again, just letting her know that I'm present, and clearly, letting her that I love her.
Mm-hmm.
I allow her to talk through things, to process, vocally, which that's a lot of the way
Helpful
that
for
she
me, yeah.
processes things. And so I listen. And it's not like I'm listening while I'm on the computer or watching some TV show or whatever, no, and I'm not on my phone scrolling. Yeah, yeah, honey. Well, yep, yeah, I got you. No,
Mm-hmm.
it's focused attention, listening to her.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there's nothing that I'm saying. Sometimes I do say some things. It just depends on what the exact situation is. But to the most, to the largest extent, I'm just listening to her and allowing her to process that. And then there are some things that I do try to do that give sort of moments of relief.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll bring her chocolate. She loves chocolate.
Yeah.
And so I like to bring her chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
I've brought her flowers. Um, I really try to encourage us
Mm-hmm.
together to go on a walk.
That helps a lot.
Something to just sort of get out of the current environment, to get the body moving, a little fresh air, just new scenery, And I would say that pretty much every time that has helped.
Mm-hmm.
Hadn't eliminated it, but it is. I would say, I mean, truly, like maybe there's one instance where we tried that, and she just wanted to come home because she just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't into it.
Yeah.
But I think pretty much every other instance, that's been a huge thing. Just kind of getting
Mm-hmm.
out and doing something active.
And being in it, I can't even think about walking sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even think about, sometimes I don't want to get out of bed. And so making it to the couch is like, okay, so for someone outside of me to be aware that, hey, I will drive you to a location and we can walk
Yeah.
together. It's like, oh, yes.
And with that, I can't do that all the time,
Right.
but in at least for us, I would say at moments where maybe her anxiety and depression were the most challenging, I would say that I have been in a position to where I could say, hey, I think we just need to go take a walk today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so not everybody's jobs, clearly would allow for something
Mm-hmm.
like that. But with the way that I'm able to, for the most part, manage my schedule, if something like that was needed, then I would just make it happen.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's been super super helpful, and it's almost like we have almost like a little protocol. It's not even something that we talk about anymore, but we know the things that works, and he knows that particularly when I'm in a state of depression, like I just feel like I'm falling into this black hole and I can't think. Like it feels like my mind just kind of goes numb, and so I can't even think of the possibility of taking a walk. And then if I did, the idea of having to drive myself to the park is just even more overwhelming. So for you to be able to be somebody outside, realize, okay, you said you're depressed. I can tell you're kind of going into a bad place. I'm going to offer this thing. It's really helpful. You've also taken me to the movies when I've been in a really high state of anxiety to kind of help distract. So that's been helpful. But I would just say whatever it is, come up with a couple's protocol of things that are helpful, and let your spouse, whether it's written down on a 3x5 card or something, and just be like, here's kind of a list of things you could try. It'd be super helpful. I won't be able to think of it in the moment, but maybe you can. And
we've even had conversations about that, and I've actually kind of encouraged Ashley to kind of make a list of things that provide her comfort or can serve as a positive way or a positive distraction,
mm-hmm.
That sort of thing. But sometimes there have certainly been moments to where something happens, and honestly, it's probably social media driven a lot of times. But to where she all of a sudden just really starts spiraling.
Yeah.
And in those moments, like again, it's kind of the same with the panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just no words. Like you're not going to say, like there's nothing beneficial to be said.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to listen,
mm-hmm.
and then just again. I just let Ashley know that I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm attentive. Again, listening, to the things she's saying, taking note,
mm-hmm.
of that, because I do know that tomorrow we're going to revisit this conversation.
I'm going to have a different perspective.
And she'll have a different perspective.
Yeah.
But, in those moments, I mean, she really is kind of bringing up and talking about some of her biggest fears,
mm-hmm.
which again, that's why I'm listening.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm paying attention to those moments.
Yeah.
And then that next day, we can just talk about those things
mm-hmm.
in a way that hopefully will be beneficial.
Right.
So
I think the most recent time you were talking about, there was something that happened and it was really scaring me. And
do you want to name what that is or no?
No,
okay.
Probably
all
not.
Right, let's go.
But it happened, and I was really spiraling into a lot of anxiety around it. And Will didn't even say this at all, but I was like, I am not overreacting. He hadn't said I was overreacting, but I was like, this is true and factual. And, he's like, right. And the next day I was like, I was overreacting. He was like, you could touch me. So, sometimes understanding the psychology of trauma, and when you kind of get activated, your mind isn't thinking like it is when you're not activated. So
Yeah.
both of us know that when I'm in a state like that, again, reason is not going to be there because your critical faculties have shut off when you're heightened in anxiety. Like that's just a trauma science thing. But later they'll come back online and I'll be like, oh yeah, this isn't actually as big deal as possible. I'm not going to die from this. It'll be okay.
It'll be okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's maybe just two questions, and these kind of
Okay.
go together. You know, if there were like a couple tips, like 2 or 3 tips that you would just say, maybe it's a reiteration of what you've already said to spouses who are taking care of their spouses who've experienced abuse, supporting them, and then, you know, anything that you might want to leave as a point of encouragement for audience. Because one thing I just want to note is that while we've been talking about the trauma, our marriage has really been amazing.
Yeah.
And people told us our first year of marriage was going to be, you know, hell and just like really hard, and that marriage is like getting hit by a Mack truck. And we've had hard things happen to us,
Yeah.
but this has not been hard.
That's right.
The trauma has been hard, but we have not had that. And so maybe talking about that, and then any tips that you have.
Well, you know, I would say, and I probably have already communicated some of this, but I would say one of the biggest, you know, tips or whatever that I would give is to, there's really a few. You know, one is to certainly listen, to actively listen to the other person. You know, and of course, part of that, if you're actively listening, then you really are showing that you are caring. And then just the communication. Communication is huge, and I would say that is with any and every relationship,
Right.
Business, personal, whatever. Communication is huge, but also communication is a two-way street for it to be most effective. And so again, Ashley was doing a lot of the work, but so was I, and we were just being intentional. You know, we knew that we you know, loved each other. We know that we love each other, and so again, like I don't know if this is the right, but like we just allowed space for each other to I don't know, to just sort of communicate and process and sort of figure things out, and that's the one thing I guess I hadn't mentioned, and I think it maybe relates to this, but with the environment that Ashley came out of, there were so many things that she just hadn't experienced.
Yeah.
And she was not in a situation to where she was able to try new things, different things, and fail. And so that was actually one of the things that I guess I kind of noticed a little bit early on, and kind of made the active choice to let her fail in a lot of things. And clearly, you know, we're married, and so if she fails, then that's going to have clearly a negative impact on our will here. But that was okay because, you know, through that process, you know, she's just, again, been given space to make decisions, to figure things out. And so I think that's also has been, you know, very important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you know, if there was something devastating or
Right.
catastrophic, or hey, this is really going to alter the way that we're going to live our lives, or, you know, whatever, those things, like clearly I would say, I think we need to talk about this a little bit more.
But something like my fashion, the man let me fail for like a good 3 years in that area, and then he's like, babe, I think we need to get some new clothes for you, and it's okay to hire a stylist. And I was like, oh, thank you. But no, it was actually really sweet and a transformational time. But like things like that, you know, I hadn't had a lot of freedom in my clothing before, so allowing me to discover those things even when I was wearing some not so great stuff. Turns out black leggings don't go with everything.
That's right.
Or cat shoes. But aside from that,
cooking.
Oh yeah, the cooking. Lots of cooking fails. And you know, I was afraid that when I wasn't a good cook that he was going to be angry, because that's what a wife is supposed to do or something. But, you know, we just went to a restaurant and got something different when the dinner was inedible for the
Yeah.
first year.
I mean, maybe for the first 3 months, like we would purchase food to cook and then we would leave it on the stove
Yes.
and go out to eat.
It was bad.
That is reality for especially probably the solid 2 months
Yeah.
until we navigated that a little bit. So that's, again, it's a little bit of money, but it was just one of those things we navigated. And sort of the outcome of all of that is Ashley doesn't enjoy cooking. And that is okay. And so we just work around it. And that's fine. Like it's again, like we can get into traditional gender roles and this and that and whatever else, but like most of that stuff is just nonsense. You just have to find out kind of what works for you. And that's what we have done through these past, several years. And man, like it's been a great journey.
It absolutely has. Thank you so much for sharing this, Will. I really do think that people listening, will enjoy this discussion because it does have some particular challenges when you're married to a survivor, and I'll be the first to say that. But I'm hoping that people's takeaway from this is not that it's something impossible that you can't enjoy your relationship if there's trauma in one of the people, but that with intentionality you can have a really great relationship, and it just requires some care. And basically the things that you would use to have a healthy relationship with anything and anyone, they're the same principles you use with somebody with trauma, just that compassion, empathy, care, and giving them space to make their own choices.
That's the summation right there, what you just said. So.
Okay, cool. Well, I have something else exciting to announce. We have actually turned not only this episode, it will be there shortly, but all of our back episodes from season 1 of the Courage Conversation Show to all of this season's episodes into a podcast. So you can go to wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Yeah, Spotify.
I don't know. They're wherever you get them.
We use Apple products, so
Right.
iTunes, that's where we go to, but wherever else.
It's syndicated across all of them.
Yeah.
And you can download back episodes, so maybe you want to listen when you're in the car and you don't want to have the video on. We would love for you to subscribe to that. You can just search Courage Conversations and Courage 365. Either of those should pull it up pretty easily. We would love to have a review also if you would help us out with that, because that will allow us to reach more people. But yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in. And as always, if you are in a dangerous situation, if you know or suspect child abuse, it is really important that you contact the police. But for other situations that maybe are not as imminent, you can go to courage365.org and click our Need Help tab. When you go there, we have a list of hotlines and other resources that can be helpful to you. We have our Facebook group that you can join. And then you can follow us on all of our social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the places. And then just for visiting our website, when you go to courage365.org, you can get a copy of our free ebook, 5 Keys to Living a Life of Courage. Never done that before.
Oh, it's funny.
Anyway, everybody, have a good rest of your week and live with courage.